start talking English now because we have many English guests now. We want to start the panels. We will have 5 panels, and each panel will have a host. And the host, I will introduce the host very shortly, and then the host will introduce the speakers. And we will start immediately with my wonderful colleague, Monique Giese. Where is she? Monique Giese. It's the first panel. It's Opportunities Update from IMO, EU, and others.
Sorry, the red carpet was missing.
Oh, yeah, I know you're used to it, right?
So hello everyone, and welcome to this seadevcon 21. And Carsten, where is he? Over there. Thank you very much for organizing it. I know that it's a very hard job, and so I would like to introduce my panelists, but just shortly because they have 3 minutes where they introduce themselves and what they do. So on my panel, Regulation and Opportunities Update from IMO, EU and others, is first of all Sofia Fürstenberg Stott. She is partner at Fürstenberg Maritime Advisors. Just take a seat for a while. Torsten Thiele, founder of Global Ocean Trust. And Frederica Süß, she's co-founder of Etica. I would like, Sofia, would you start your presentation? 3-minute introduction.
Thank you very much. Great to be here in Hamburg on this windy day. I represent a micro consultancy. We are myself and my husband who run Fürstenberg Maritime Advisory, and we try to help the medium and smaller shipping companies finding strategic pathways regarding sustainability, primarily decarbonization, but also the much wider perspective on ESG. Because what we see is that it's primarily the big shipping companies who are able to engage sufficiently in this conversation. They are the ones who have resources to attend the different coalitions and initiatives. And the smaller owners are struggling to understand how to even take a first step. And that's where we come in. So I hope there is an opportunity to tell you more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Sofia. So Torsten, would you go next? You can, yeah. If you have slides, just there's the clicker.
Super, good afternoon. Great to be back in my hometown. I'm presently based in Berlin because I work with the politicians. And as a finance person, that is a challenge, because the challenge is to explain to them and the world that ocean is our largest opportunity, but if we do it wrong, if we let the ocean deteriorate, which is what is going on at the moment, we have a real issue. So we need that interface of science, technology, finance, and public-private partnerships. And so Global Ocean Trust is a small NGO that supports that story, brings it across both in terms of the challenges, which, as you know, are massive, but also the opportunities. Each of these challenges is a massive opportunity, but our time frames are very short. So this is why we need the engagement now, and we need expertise to do that. So we provide that kind of expert knowledge and engagement and support that these processes, these traditional processes need to move them to 21st century. So I just picked one of the many papers that came out. This is from a friend of mine, came out earlier this week on the massive changes in the ocean. So you can read up on all of these things. But we wrote this as a paper to make this simpler for people to understand. So the traditional ocean economy is shrinking, but there's a huge opportunity in what we call the sustainable blue economy. So I helped define the sustainable blue economy finance principles. So we have a yardstick for finance people to engage with our space, bring them on board and invest in sustainability. And that means on the regulations and opportunities front, we'll have a discussion in a moment, so I don't need to go into this, but it is just critical to understand that we have all these international bodies trying to do stuff, and unless we provide them with input and with high ambition, we need to combine high ambition with real technical and scientifically sound solutions. So that's the challenge, that's the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Torsten. And Frederica?
Had a long presentation then. Okay. Yeah, hi from my side. My name is Frederica Süß. I don't know if you can see. Yeah. I co-founded a company starting this year, Etica. We support small and medium-sized companies to tackle sustainability. Our goal is to make it very concrete and hands-on, because we think sustainability sometimes is very abstract. So we're trying to change that. I bring 10 years of experience in sustainability management. I was a sustainability manager at a German retailer, and the last 4 years I spent working as a consultant at an inspection and certification agency, SGS, here in Hamburg. Maybe some of you know it. It's a B2B company, and yeah, I've trained more than 300 company representatives, worked with 100 companies, and audited also 50 factories. So just quickly, oh, sorry, my slide is gone. Well, just quickly, what we do at Etica. So we have 4 things where we help companies, and one thing is that we work on codes of conduct. And maybe for you this seems like a small thing, but a code of conduct is basically a document that tells companies how they want to act. And so we spend some time to draft out this document so that every employee knows what they need to do. The second thing we do is we consult companies on due diligence laws, and I don't know if you've heard, but there's a big increase in due diligence, so supply chain due diligence legislation in Germany, but also in Europe and the entire world, and we're going to speak about this also in a second. And the third thing we do is that we consult companies on CSR concepts, and maybe that's the part that I play today, which is to think about sustainability also in a bigger picture. So yes, it's about CO2, but there's also other elements such as human rights, labor rights, and other topics. And so the environment as a whole, right? So we also need to think about what goes in the products of, in ships, and how do they get recycled. So CO2 is one topic, but let's not forget that there's other topics that we need to consider in this.
Okay, thank you, Frederica. We will come to that later, but let's start with decarbonization. So let's see where we are. So we have IMO that has implemented some global regulations like EEDI, what you mentioned, Torsten, the sulfur cap, and then there is the CO2 reduction. We have an ambition to reduce 50% by 2050. And then the EU lost its patience and said, well, no, 55% by 2030, and well, carbon-free by 2050. It appears that IMO was very silent after the EU announced the Green Deal, but I learned today from you, Sofia, that this is not the case, that this is just my impression, my personal impression. Maybe you can elaborate a bit more what from your perspective happens at IMO.
Thank you for that question. Well, I think that the IMO will increase their ambition levels, and that they are increasingly aware of the importance for doing so. Yesterday, there was an announcement of the call for action by the Global Maritime Forum going to COP26 in Glasgow, of more than 150 companies signing a call to action to decarbonize completely by 2050. And with that, there is also conversations on how the IMO needs to help these private initiatives to actually come to fruition. And everybody agrees that the IMO is slow. And I would think that they agree it themselves. And to those of you who might have attended an IMO meeting, you would see how everything is agreed in the corridors and in this big aula. It's super politicized, and it is a huge battle to get things through. But at the end of the day, this is a global organization which everybody has to follow, right? So shipping is the only industry that is governed by an international organization. And with that, it's a huge opportunity to really have an impact on decarbonization, for instance. And so I am positive about what IMO can achieve. And after COP26, I am expecting to see a lot more coming from the IMO. So, yeah.
So there is something going on. But looking at the EU and the Green Deal, and maybe also Torsten or Frederica into your direction, well, they said, well, we want to have shipping into the ETS system, or potentially a carbon tax, but, well, something like a regulation that is more regional, or whenever you call a European port. Is that something we should move forward, or will IMO be potentially faster than EU implementing European regulations?
Thanks for that. And I think the great statement is, like Sofia mentioned, we're moving now from the what to the how. So this will happen. We can't have sectors outside the carbon rules. So we can't have aircrafts outside carbon, we can't have shipping outside carbon. Now it's just a matter of how. Everybody's going to go net zero, and we need to find the quickest, easiest, most efficient way. And I believe that innovation and technology will play a crucial role in that, and we need to push that. But you need economic and financial incentives. And so I was very pleased when our friends from the Federated States of Micronesia said, how about a carbon price of 100? Let's start with that. That gives you an economic framework to calculate and get going. And so we will get to what I hope is a very nice competitive debate where we will see how the European carbon trading mechanism will provide an incentive in one direction, where the IMO, and that was very much the key message, was they wanted global. And so if they want to play a role in this globally, they have to move along this pathway. So it's worth watching. It will happen, and it's all about our creativity and ingenuity to deliver the solutions first.
Yeah, and maybe that's also a message to companies, right? To say, okay, there's a lot happening on the political level and you should observe it, but the path is net zero, right? So you might start today, whatever the IMO or the EU puts, because that is the path forward. So the earlier you get going, just the better it is, I think.
I would like to go back to the numbers because, well, I saw that, well, I guess I'm not quite sure whether Hapag-Lloyd is already here, but well, looking at the numbers compared to 2008, well, shipping reached a 30% deduction in 2018 already, and Hapag-Lloyd has announced that, and other shipping companies as well, that they have already, or they are currently meeting the IMO goals, and we speak about ambition. So what is the correct ambition? Getting to zero until 2030? Is that manageable? What do you think?
Well, this is back to the global framework. By 2050, everything has to be net zero. If you want to be net zero by 2050, you have to make important decisions in this decade. And so therefore, I don't think it's so much about what's the starting year or what's the end year. It's all about what can we do right now. And just listen to Maersk announcement. We have clear statements in this directions by the industry leaders. Sofia?
Yeah, and I would like to add to that 2030, if we take that as a target year, we have to create systemic change. There is infrastructure that needs to be developed. There are new fuels that need to come on stream. This has to be co-organized with aviation, with other hard-to-abate industries. Offshore wind needs to build out, etc., etc. And there are calculations made, for instance, by UMass, who works together with the Global Maritime Forum, suggesting that in order to be able to scale at such speed that by 2050 we are reaching decarbonization, by 2030 5% of the global tonnage needs to be operating on net zero carbon. And so if you have that number, you can then start to look at, therefore, how many ships need to be built when, and how much fuel of methanol or ammonia or whatever it is need to be produced. And it's that systemic insight that we need to have in order to start making investment decisions and start pushing policies and other regimes to actually move forward. Because nobody, not even Maersk, can do this alone. So it's this systemic understanding that we all need to make sure we have in order to be able to move forward.
I would like to stick to, because you mentioned it and you mentioned it as well, to the alternative fuels. So, well, I guess we are all clear for decarbonization. We need to get rid of fossil oils. This is quite clear. But the regulation on, and that's what you mentioned, Torsten, how to do it, really. Which fuel is the fuel of the future for global shipping, not for, like, for example, hydrogen for smaller ships, and we will speak about that later during the conference. But what is there any regulation that potentially may be the right one to go with? A guess is also okay.
Is that coming back to me now? Thank you for that question. I think that the scaling question is absolutely necessary to focus on, that we are able to start small and build up. And therefore, even local incentives can be very powerful, where you are able to reduce the costs needed to build that infrastructure, to take those investment decisions. But then at the global level, I'm absolutely sure, and many reports agree that we need a carbon levy. And the price there is then the other question. How much should this cost? And there are suggestions that $200 per ton would solve it. And then we have the proposal at the IMO for the research fund that is $2 per ton. So there you can see how far we have to go to really make this happen.
Okay, thank you. So leaving decarbonization for now, and Frederica, coming to you, because you mentioned there are, well, besides decarbonization, there are also other regulations that should be taken into consideration here. And one of them is the human rights due diligence law. Can you say or elaborate a bit more on what impact that may have on the global supply chains?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, there's a couple of laws that came up in the last 10 or 20 years that force companies to look into their supply chain and identify the biggest human rights and environmental risks. And in Germany, there's this law that comes up 2023. The European Union is thinking about a law, but if you look at the world map, it's really filling up. And that just means that companies, especially bigger companies, need to look into the supply chain and really know what's happening there. So this is a more human rights lens. So for carriers, for instance, it could mean, okay, what is needed to build this ship and how is it, gewonnen? So I don't know, the raw material, right? How is it taken out of the ground? Then obviously CO2 emissions is a human rights risk, right, as well. We have had the Constitutional Court in Germany in April basically ruling out or saying that the German climate laws are not strict enough because they are not strict enough in order to save or that guarantee future generations the same life, right? So that's a really key decision that's been made by the court. So CO2 would be another human right under that law, maybe as well, right? So and then we have also the human rights aspect, right? That we have crews that go all over the world, and we know that there's been issues with that as well. So yeah, it's just an additional thing to keep in mind, and that's why I'm always for this kind of holistic mindset to think about, if you're a company, what are your biggest risks, right? And CO2 is definitely on the high agenda, but let's put other topics with that so that, you know, your company can really be thriving.
For this moment, because, well, this specific law, well, pays into transparency, which is, well, so to say, a big problem in the industry, so to say. Well, given that, and also giving reporting requirements on sustainability, I mean,
right.
Looking at the sustainability report where you have to, well, report not really so much details.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think would help specifically when it comes to regulations on reporting requirements and also compliance requirements, because that is, well, so to say, currently more or less a jungle.
Yeah. And to be honest, I see there the EU and other players as the main responsible people, because they make it really difficult, I find, right? Like, it's their job to make it easy, and they're publishing or releasing all these laws that have different reporting requirements, right? So me as a company, I need a report for the due diligence law in a certain way, for human rights a certain way, for CO2 a certain way, and that's definitely overwhelming and is not going to get us further. So I think, especially with CO2, it needs to be clear how to report. Also, the definition of climate neutral, net zero, right? It's so confusing. Like, what does it really mean? What do you need to do as a company? Which scopes are in it, which are not, right? So, as you say, it's complete jungle, and I think we have work to do on that one.
And I guess that IMO potentially may play an important role in this as well, to, well, set common rules that are applicable for everyone, so that not everyone does whatever he wants to do it. Okay, let's leave this for a while. I would like to come to finance, because well, financing was always a big problem. Well, in the past, now the industry is very healthy and is really earning money. So not to say they're swimming in money, but well, they have the ability to invest in well, alternative fuels, in new ships, and, well, coming to finance, there is no real, well, there are a lot of regulations around finance, but not when it comes to ESG and sustainability things. There is like a guideline published by BaFin. So, but to my understanding, and well, when I speak with my clients, they say, well, at the moment, no one is really caring about sustainability when it comes to ship financing. So, will these guidelines, or should they go into real regulation so that there is pressure from that side as well? So you...
Sorry, I believe this is happening. I mean, this is not something far out in the future. In fact, I think it's the opposite. At the moment, we have about 200 different impact standard frameworks that need to be consolidated, brought together. That's part of the reason why we have the EU green taxonomy coming along. That's why we have the TCFD and the nature-based disclosure. So if you think about it from a financial point of view, I've got potential physical risks around these types of changes coming, and then I have the transition risk of financing a company that is set up in the wrong way and therefore doesn't survive under the new framework, the new changes, the new regulatory environments. So financial analysis in this respect is getting increasingly stringent. And from an investor point of view, there's a large amount of money chasing good, solid projects that are aligned with sustainability. So I think finance will become a significant factor in pushing in this direction.
Yeah, I would like to mention the Poseidon Principles under the Global Maritime Forum. I don't know how many banks now are signatories to the Poseidon Principles, but they have had their first assessment after 2019 was the first year when this was run, and I mean it's creating a taxonomy. It's creating a language that you can gather around and push your competing banks into innovating. And I think green finance is ripe for innovation, and we will see a lot happening there, because today when you are looking for financing for your zero carbon ship, you are coming in with much more risk than the banks can actually handle with the current systems today. So it's ripe for innovation.
But the question for me is, well, looking at the banks, and well, I've spoken with some of them, do they really have the people to assess sustainability risks in shipping? Or do we need more than guidelines to say what is the sustainability in a, I don't know, 15 years old ship?
So I know a little bit about the CSR regulation, right? The directive, the EU directive, and on that it's a very high level, right? So they look at companies, but they don't look at transport or shipping as a main, right? I mean, if it's a report of a carrier, let's say, or freight forwarder, then maybe they send the right people, but I would say that there's a lot of still black boxes, and I don't think everybody really knows how to assess properly.
But this is exactly what's happening now. It's going by sector to sector. So maritime is coming. And frankly, if you're a young, capable person in the financial industry, this is one of the sectors you'll focus on, because this is where the future of your capacity will sit. If you think about it, we have these several big risks, and at central banking level, this is now fully understood. We've got the climate risk, we've got the broader biodiversity risk, and we have all the pollution and additional factors that make both of those other ones even more challenging. So as a consequence, you need an approach that allows you to survive and thrive in a way that is circular and that works with nature and people, and so delivers those. And so I believe that the financial sector is increasingly aware that this is a massive transition and a massive opportunity. And so I think we will be seeing more and more people focusing on this, and you hear it now from leading central bankers and others that this is the direction of travel.
Okay. So, future expectations. So, what can we expect from COP26?
I think COP26 will be a real final opportunity to put the Paris rulebook in place. So we have an agreement, but until we deal with these two key components, one is finance, as we just talked about, and that is crucial for COP26. And the other one are all the cross-border adjustment parts, which were too difficult to deal with in the previous rounds. We now have a whole range of players who want this to happen. So I think COP26 will be a really important guidance in this direction.
I think also that COP26 will force the various big industries to work together on solving these big problems, that shipping and aviation and the cement industry and whatever is going to find strategic collaborations forward and working more in a holistic perspective. It's needed, and it's very complex, and I think we have had a couple of years trialing and error that now. So after COP26, we need to show that we can actually deliver on that.
Yeah, maybe something to add. Like I'm always with a lot of care to look at these events, because we've been disappointed so often in the past, right? Like they should have put higher targets, they should have done. So I'm just very always optimistic in the private sector, because I find that they find, for instance, this human rights law, right? So companies have been doing this 20 years already, this entire work, right? And the law is coming now. And I kind of see it, unfortunately, the same way. I mean, not the same way, because we need a tax, we need incentives, market incentives, but still, I think there's a lot of opportunity for private companies to lead the way at the end. So I have expectations, but I also would get to work still.
Yeah, and then we need innovation in policy development as well. We need the policies to be such that we are accelerating the green transition, and so the politicians have a responsibility to read up and make good, informed decisions to enable this transition.
So maybe, Torsten, to you, the question on the BBNG treaty. So what will that bring in?
Yes, so what we're talking about is under the law of the sea. At the moment in international waters, we can't do things like have marine protected areas. Now, if you listen to Frau Merkel's speech at the UN General Assembly yesterday, she confirmed what a lot of other leaders have now confirmed, which is that by 2030, we want to be able to protect 30% on land and at sea. This is only possible if we get this new agreement through. And fortunately, we are right at the end of a 15-year process of negotiating it. So there'll be a final negotiating round in March, and that agreement will then allow the allocation, the decision around that type of marine protection. Now, what I've been arguing is that that is a huge opportunity because it allows us to protect biologically diverse hotspots and key areas in the area, but also to do it in ways where we optimize operationally activities. So if we have better satellites to know where these better satellite coverage to know where these areas are, it also allows us to deal with illegal fishing, which is a hugely destructive industry that has no productiveness, that uses a lot of harmful subsidies. So all of that can change. But also, if we take shipping as an example, having much more precise remote sensing data will allow us to optimize shipping routes using the same technical capacity that we will need to put in place for the sort of protection. So I believe this new international agreement, which still needs to be finalized, which still needs to be negotiated, still need to get the politicians to actually sign up to this, will be an important step as to how the high seas will be regulated. So it's something worth watching.
So last question, and maybe hand over to the next panel is, looking at the current market situation. So there is money in the industry, which is, I'm very happy about it because, the industry suffered for a very long time. So it's good that it has changed. Do we really need regulations, or will the companies potentially, because they want to and they see it as a value driver to be sustainable in the future, will they change potentially on their own? And when I'm saying this, I always keep in mind Otto Schacht is somewhere there, and he has always his jacket on where it says, sustainability is a race that we need to win. So a company being convinced in their business model, changing without regulation because they see sustainability as a value driver. So will the industry change without regulations, potentially?
I think it's super important that we have the regulations in place and provide a level playing field. That said, sustainability is a strategic opportunity on so many levels and needed for every company in order to make the right decisions in the green transition. So to look at sustainability as a compliance issue is a big mistake. This is a strategic opportunity that needs to be getting the highest attention.
Okay.
And exactly like you say about the playing field, we have leading companies that will do this. It would be entirely unfair if there are competitors who will not be caught by regulation. So regulation is in support of leading companies doing the right thing.
Yes, I agree. On the same time, I don't think you can really create a level playing field. Like, I always find this a little bit, because there's always going to be, so I agree it's important, but there's always going to be companies that are going to do more and companies that are just going to do that, right? So wherever you are in the value chain, you're going to get the pressure, and you don't really care about that specific law. You care maybe more about the market demands, right? So those are there, and that's why I think, yes, it will happen even without the regulation. I mean, the companies I work with, they don't need a next law. They just like, what can we do, right? They need solutions. I think they're where we went away to say it's important, do something. Now we are thinking at the step of how we do it and what are the solutions, right?
Okay, so for closing this panel before the time, so I usually end my panels with a wish. So what do you wish for the industry? There was a surprise that was not prepared.
I wish for the industry to to leave their chairs and to really get their hands dirty with this challenge they have in front of them. Enough talking, let's start doing.
I think I would agree. I don't have anything smart to say.
I think we all agree. I just say what we are doing to nature is indefensible and it's really fast. And so every industry, every sector has to help us deal with this problem. So yeah, let's get off our chairs.
Thank you so much. And well, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Monique, Sofia, Fürstenberg, Stott, Frederica Süß, and Torsten Thiele. Thank you very much.